Okay, let's see if we remember how to do this. For the first time in a while, I get to say the phrase, it's ClipperBlog Live. Welcome to the Clippers season preview show, our first show of the year, certainly not our last. I'm Fred Katz. Let's re-meet the usual panel in Los Angeles. Hair looking as flowing as ever is Patrick James.
Howdy, folks. Still here in the laundry room, ready for the season to start.
Also in LA, and also still looking like a frattier version of Myers Leonard.
What's up, guys?
All right, so let's start off on this. It's halftime of the Dallas-San Antonio game right now. We're going to try to get this in and move it in for the second half and be done soon. Quickly go over the moves. I've got them written out here. Clippers finished with 56 wins last year, lost to Oklahoma City in the second round of the playoffs. They gave the full mid-level exception to Spencer Hawes. They also signed Jordan Farmar to replace Darren Collison in the offseason. They traded Jared Dudley in order to make room to sign Epe Udoh. And Chris Douglas-Roberts made some smaller moves on top of that. Jovan, let's go to you first. What were your general thoughts on the Clippers offseason?
I really like the offseason. Obviously, the Dudley move was a little controversial, and I think if you look at it, what Dudley could be, I still think he could be the player that the Clippers wanted him to be last season, potentially. I think you'd rather have that player than CDR and Udoh. But you know, they made that move, and you know, I guess there's some implications with how successful it is in the short term. But I don't know. Overall, I thought Hawes was huge. I think Farmar is better than Collison at 40% of the price. I think, you know, they brought back Baby. They signed Udoh, so they have the strongest front court that we've had, or you know, that they've had in the Chris Paul era. So I think in that regard, that's great. Obviously, there's a glaring weakness on the perimeter in terms of defense, and even a little bit of shooting, I'd say. So that hopefully they can shore up that hole through a trade, or maybe someone gets bought out mid-season. But overall, I think I ended up giving them about a B+, the off-season grade. That's not even to mention the Sterling stuff, so that might even move them into the A range. But yeah, I was pleased because they didn't need to do that much. They just need to make a couple tweaks, and they got the third big that we've been clamoring for the last 3 years. So with that regard, I think it was a B+, A- off season.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say certainly compared to the idea of Jared Dudley, what they have now might leave a little to be desired, but in terms of the reality of what they had in the playoffs last year, you have to say that they're better across the board. Big Baby went from being like their only reliable big off the bench to now being maybe the fifth in line, and that is just a huge difference. They, for the first time, have in the Chris Paul era, have a backup big man who doesn't really kill them on both sides of the floor. And that's just something they didn't really have with any consistency. Yeah, I know Kenyon Martin had a good quarter or two where he like got his hand on that Rudy Gay jumper, but like let's be honest, they haven't had somebody that was reliable as that was a potential starter the way that Hawes is. So that's a big signing. I think what remains to be seen going forward is whether the warring kind of cognitive dissonance of Doc the GM versus Doc the coach becomes a problem. One thing that you hear from kind of beat writers is that coaches love guys who show up really hard in practice, but sometimes that can cloud your judgment with regard to long-term health of the team. Like maybe, like we don't know whether re-signing Hidu because of stuff that Doc happens to see from him up close and personal. You know, maybe he likes something he sees that, you know, somebody with more critical distance who's not a GM, who's a GM but not a coach and not there at practice every day, might have the kind of distance to be like, well, okay, yeah, it's nice that we feel good about him, but we could have signed somebody else for that money that we'd get more out of this year. And so I don't know. Those things are all questions. We're not going to answer them tonight, but those are things that we'll think about for the long term. But, you know, in general, decent offseason.
You're teasing the crowd. These are questions, but we're not going to get to them tonight. We will answer these in the future for you, I promise. And Patrick, I love that you're making references all the way back to Game 1 of 2012 with Kenyon Martin and Rudy Gay. So well done on that front. Let's talk about the Wild West, which is amazingly difficult this year. You look at the top teams. I mean, Patrick and I were just talking about this before we came on. Jovan wasn't talking about it because he was sitting on his couch, not in the video chat, deciding to be late. And the West is just so tough this year. Jovan's not even reacting to that right now. The West is so tough this year. With Golden State getting better and Dallas getting better and San Antonio being San Antonio. Patrick, where do you think the Clippers rank in the West, and where are they going to finish?
I don't have a good sense at all of where they will finish. It wouldn't surprise me if they finished first. It wouldn't surprise me if they finished fifth. It's going to be such a murderer's row to get through the West. I don't know what the answer is to the Clippers' wing problem yet, and I don't know what that means for pick-and-roll defense or perimeter defense. I know they had a good three-point defense last year in terms of percentage, but they also allowed a ton of threes, and they just didn't go in. So I don't see the defense being better on the perimeter this year. It makes me worried, especially after watching the preseason, about having some threes drained on them. So I could see them being kind of more middle of the pack, but still having a decent shot to come out.
Well, I think there's a clear hierarchy in the West, and it's kind of I know Zach Lowe wrote about it today, kind of his different tiers of the NBA, and I actually agree with most of what he said. I think you have your contenders at the top, which is just the Spurs, Thunder, and Clippers. Probably in that order, although I'd say the Clippers might be ahead of the Thunder in my personal rankings just because they finally have. I mean, they almost beat the Thunder with Big Baby, like you said, Patrick, being their only competent bench big. Now they have Spencer Hawes, who is like a starter quality center. So I think I'd go Clippers number 2 right now. I actually think they're going to finish with the best record in the West because I think the Kevin Durant injury, if he misses 20 to 25 games. Look at how shallow that Thunder bench is. That team is gonna. I think they're gonna struggle to be 500. And even if they're like 14 and 12 or something like that, like that's not. What are the Clippers gonna be at that point? Like 19 and 7, 19 and 6. Like so, you just gotta look at it that way. I think the Thunder are gonna drop to. They'll still be a top 3 team in the West, but they might finish with a 4 or 5 seed. Then you're looking at the Warriors, Grizzlies. I think they're that like next tier. And then below them, I'd go Mavs, Rockets, Blazers, and then the rest of like Suns, Pelicans, whatever. But I think the Clippers are clearly in that top tier with the Spurs and Thunder. I think this is a situation where they just kind of everything could break right and they get the number 1 seed because I think we always talk about the Spurs are going to fall off at some point. Well, they are going to fall off at some point. And Duncan's 38, Ginobili's 37. Like this could be the season that Pop is has to rest them even more. And I mean, I don't know. I have a good feeling about the Clippers winning around 60 games this year, and I think that would get them the 1 seed.
One quick note about the Thunder schedule, Jovan, is that Kevin Durant's supposed to miss 6 weeks. Now, who knows if he actually ends up doing that or not. But if you take their opening night game, which is tomorrow, and go 6 weeks into the future, that's 21 games. Only 8 of those games are against teams that made the playoffs last year. And only 5 are against games that I think were 50-win teams last year. So it's a really easy schedule. They have like 2 huge chunks where they play the East a lot. So I feel like even with Jackson hurt and with Durant out, if Durant comes back in time, like who's to say they couldn't be 14-7, 13-8 totally in the hunt in those 21 games? But he could be out for longer than that, and they could still fall
That's
out.
right. I think he's going to be out longer.
Yeah, it's totally possible. Patrick, sorry, what were you saying?
I was just going to say that the difference I was expecting to be between the first-ranked team and the 5th or 6th is only going to be a matter of a few games. That's what I meant by, like, it could be anyone. I agree, generally speaking, with your hierarchy. But, like, a couple losses or a tough back-to-back could swing that come the end of the season is all I meant.
Oh, I mean, this is a different topic, but honestly, the Warriors are starting to scare me. I was, like, looking at their 9-man rotation, and that's a scary rotation.
The Warriors, when they have Iguodala on the floor, are just a totally different team.
With them, it's just they have 5 or 6 guys that are really injury prone, and they're all important. And it's like if they stay healthy, it's like not likely that that at least 2 of those guys go down. I don't know, but that's different. That's a different blog live, I guess.
Warriors Blog Live.
Yeah.
Well, I have one more big question for you guys, and then we'll get into the quicker hitting stuff. It's something that I kind of wonder. I'm not even quite sure what the answer to this is, and I'm curious to know your opinions. Jovan, I'll ask you first. Who is more important to this Clippers team this year? Is it Blake Griffin or is it Chris Paul, especially with Griffin? I feel like it's just getting harder and harder to answer that question.
I'm going to hedge this and give you two answers. I think Chris Paul is more important for the regular season, and I think Blake Griffin's more important for the playoffs. I think we've seen the last 2 years Chris, battle with injuries and kind of pace himself and not really go all out in full point guard mode. And I think that's cost the Clippers some games. Again, some winnable games against good teams, and even against mediocre teams. Sometimes Chris just isn't going all out, and that's why I know this is 2 years ago, but he averaged under 17 points and 10 assists. But Chris really could average like 23 and 11 if he wanted to. That would be taxing on his body, and I know he has to obviously conserve himself, and Doc's going to try and limit his minutes and so on and so forth. But I really think an engaged, fully focused, Chris Paul in point guard mode, this team could win 65 games if that's the case. And that's not hyperbole. I legitimately think that. It's just a matter of how well he can, stay rested, I guess, off the court and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think Chris Paul is the key to this team having a successful regular season. Him staying healthy and being as productive as he can be. Playoffs, it's Blake Griffin because, this season he did play better, but the two prior postseasons, Blake, you look at his stats, he was like 16 and 7. He was not really an all-star in the last two postseasons. So I think Blake, even this postseason, he wasn't as good as he was in the regular season. So I think if we see the regular season Blake, 25 and 10 and 4 or 5 assists, we need to see that dominant superstar. And I think that those are your two answers there, because Chris Paul is going to bring in the playoffs. Blake's going to bring in the regular season. I think you just need the opposite to happen for both of them.
You need them both to bring it in the playoffs. I think there's no question about that. They both need to play their A games. There aren't enough pieces on the rest of the team to make up for it. And if one of them has a bad game, Griffin was absolutely stellar for most of the Golden State series. Game one, he struggled a little bit, but that was because of minutes. But in the fourth quarter of Game 7, he was absolutely unstoppable, and the Clippers won the game basically on his back. That for some reason that's been forgotten entirely, but he put the team on his back in the fourth quarter of a Game 7 and almost single-handedly won it. With that twirling shot in the key, getting fouled. That was his sixth straight point in the quarter. So yeah, I agree with you. We need to see Griffin doing that in the playoffs. But it doesn't matter if one of them's not doing it come playoff time. It doesn't really matter what the other one does.
All right, well, let's get into some quicker stuff. First, we're gonna know first just quick questions. I want quick answers on these. How far will the Clippers go in the playoffs, Jovan?
Lose in the finals.
Lose in the Western Conference Finals.
To whom?
The Cavs.
Patrick.
Spurs.
Obviously Spurs. That's what I got. I got Spurs over Cavs, and I have the Clippers losing in the Western Conference Finals to San Antonio. How could you not? Let's get into some over-unders. Let's just go Patrick and then Jovan on these. Over-under 25 three-pointers made for Blake Griffin.
I got the under, and my reasoning is simple. Do you know how many threes Chris Bosh made his first year in Miami? 6. He didn't make over 25 until his fourth year. I think he hit 70, 74, or something like that. This takes time. That's all, as simple as that.
It's just tough for me, but I'm going under too. I think it could be close, but I'm going to go under.
Yeah, well, you make the Chris Bosh comparison. I'm going to make the Serge Ibaka comparison. I'm going to say Ibaka hit 23 last year because he's more of just a strict corner 3 guy. And so I'm going to say Griffin goes under, but just slightly. I think he probably hits 20 this year. He hit, I think, 12 last year. Over or under 65 games played for Chris Paul?
I'm going to take the under, but My hope is that it's because he sits some back-to-backs. He misses like 3 games here, 3 games there, and that there's more of a preventive approach than 12-game stretch that he's out due to kind of like cumulative injury.
This is for my own peace of mind because Chris Paul is on both of my fantasy league teams. I'm going to say over, and I was actually looking at it quickly. Like, I don't think Chris Paul is as injury prone as people think, and basically like 6 of his 9 seasons he's played including the lockout season, he's played the equivalent of like 75 games or more. So he's just had like 3 kind of bad seasons that he missed like 20 plus games in those seasons. So I don't think it's as bad as people think it is. I could see what Patrick's talking about, like the rest thing, but I'm going to say over.
Yeah, I'm going to say under because I think sporadic resting is going to be a thing for him this year, especially with Blake showing the ability to take over the team now and just kind of put it on his back and run the offense on his own. And it's not so much that Paul misses a lot of games. It's that I think he's always banged up at the end of the season going into the playoffs. He's able to play, but he's just playing at 90% as opposed to 100. I think having Chris Paul at 100% going into the postseason is worth maybe having him sit those extra 10 games. So instead of playing 75, he's maybe playing 65 or 63. And I think there's a chance we end up seeing that this year. It's the Popovichian way, which I think is going to start to take over the NBA sooner or later. Over or under 1.5 starting small forward switches during the season. The Clippers have struggled at small forward. Matt Barnes was 6 for 44 during the preseason. Chris Douglas-Roberts has never been a consistent starter. Patrick, over or under 1.5 switches for the starters this year?
Wow, picking over means we're getting. Can there be a switch back in the over? Does the over have to mean a trade? I'm taking the over.
Switch back.
I'm taking the over.
There could be you could have a switch and then a trade.
I'm taking the over, and I think that's what it is: a switch and a trade, or at least a switch and a switch back.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'll take over too with that. I could see CDR getting in there, and then maybe Barnes coming back, or trade or pick up at the deadline.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over too. I think a switch and a deadline trade seems to be coming. It almost seems inevitable at this point. Not that those guys that Barnes and CDR are bad players. They're just solid backups. And if the Clippers want to shore up their small forward position, it kind of seems like they would need to make a deal. We're going to veer off over-unders for this second to last one. What will happen more times during the season? Ralph will utter the phrase, "Settle down, Mike Smith," or Ralph and Mike will both agree in a game of haggle, no haggle.
Oh, it's settle down, Mike Smith, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
It's totally settled down, Mike Smith. It's totally going to happen. Don't you feel like they intentionally disagree a lot? Like they feel like
I don't agree with that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You're going to haggle with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'll haggle too.
I think we need to bring in haggle, no haggle into a CBL segment.
We should.
Yeah, as long as it comes with a sponsor.
All right, final one. Over under 56.5 wins. That's what Vegas has the Clippers over under at. Over under 56.5 wins for this team.
I want it to be the over. I want them to win 58 or more, just so they can finally have a 70% winning percentage. But I just see the West. I see, you beat Portland, and then you have to go play Golden State, and then one game off, and you're in Denver. I see the Clippers coming in just shy of maybe 55, 56 wins.
I'm gonna go with 60, so that's over. I'm pulling a Han here, so.
That is a Han. Han makes those moves. I'm going the over too, though. The Clippers were 57 last year, and presumably Redick will be healthier this year.
Yeah, that's it. That's a big thing.
I think that's going to make a big difference for them. Griffin will be a year improved. I think Jordan is going to be better and take a natural next step, which makes sense for him at age 26. I think they'll probably hover around 60 wins. So Andrew is influencing all of us right now. Andrew has the Clippers winning the title. So Andrew's a step beyond all of us in his homerism. Jovan, before we go, I want to hear I want to hear 30 seconds on why you didn't go up to Myers Leonard and take a doppelganger picture with him when you saw him at the game this week.
Because I was waiting in the press room for Doc Rivers to come and talk to the media, and he took like 30 minutes because they were having a team meeting after a preseason game.
At some point, we're getting you with Myers Leonard. It's going to happen.
Yeah, no, it needs to. Well, I was actually at 2 Portland games last week. I was at the Lakers one and the Clippers one. The Lakers one, I just had to get Lakers stuff, so I couldn't go into the Blazers locker room. And then the Clippers one, same thing. Just said it's tough now. The way they set it up is at Staples. I mean, it's tough to get both.
You'll get there. We'll get you to Myers Leonard. It'll happen.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for us tonight, though. The second half of the Dallas-San Antonio game is just starting up now. We're back on our usual schedule starting Thursday night after the Clippers play their opener against the Thunder. We're with you Friday after the Lakers game, and every other one after that. It's the same thing as every year. For Patrick James and Jovan Bua, I'm Fred Katz. Get ready for the season. Should be a good one. Good night, everyone.